I should have checked. Hey, there we are. We are going live here. And oh, you know, I do want to change my mic out. I'm on my bad mic here, guys. Hang on one second here.
Well, you sound good.
I do? Well, then my mic must be fine. We'll just get going then. If I sound good, then I'll just go with it. Then we're going to assume the mic is working well. All right, well, fantastic. Wow, we got a lot of people ready to go today. This is fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us live. This did look like we had a lot of people signed up for this one. Today, we are going to be going over the one big, beautiful bill betrayal. We are going to go over exactly how Donald Trump promised a lot of things and then delivered actually the opposite. Actually, Donald Trump delivered punishment for U.S. expats. He promised to end double taxation for Americans overseas, and what was delivered in the alleged one big, beautiful bill was the opposite. It's the opposite of relief. Actually, things got worse for Americans. John does have a couple bright spots. We're going to go over those, though. As you know, that John Richardson's here with us, the great John Richardson. He is here joining us today, and he's going to provide his brand of authentic, honest analysis into the problem. Thanks for joining us this morning, John. Good morning to you. Along with Keith Redmond. Keith is here, and Keith's group, he posted this on his group on Facebook, his American Expatriates group. A lot of interest on this here today. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into this one big bill. I think everyone knows the background, Keith, right? I think everyone knows what we're talking about here, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's specifically, how it's going to be affecting adversely or positively Americans overseas. We'll see. I think I'm just, I'm kind of disappointed that there was nothing in there about double taxation, but we'll see what happens in the coming months.
All right, fantastic. I am getting an echo for some reason here. I don't know where that came from, but let's see if it goes away here. There it is. All right. I think I know why. I think I have another window open here. All right. Well, anyway, let's get going here. So I have some slides. I'm going to get those up. So here it is. We're going to go start with our slide right here. Slide one, the promise was, again, to end double taxation for Americans overseas. And I see what's going on here. I have Twitter in the background that I'm hearing my own echo in. So hold on, let me close that out. There we go. All right, fantastic. All right, I'm back in action. All right, so now that distraction's that's a heck of a distraction, I got to say. All right, great. So we're going to take a closer look again today at the provisions that we're talking about. Okay. Now, we do have some good news for John. So, John, I want to get to this because we actually have some good news here. And you're thinking that this actually might apply to other areas. And let me know because you just put an article up on your website. So let me know if I should get up the article. But you're looking at this as, because there was, so explain what happened, why there might be some good news for seniors, for some seniors in some countries.
Yeah, sure. Do you want to put the article up? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put the article up here that you had. Okay. Effect of the, okay. So here's John's article. Said. Oh, we're having fun today, huh? It's technology is doing wonders today. I'm doing so much on it.
Yeah, so while we're waiting on that, I don't think that there's tons and tons in this that is necessarily going to hurt Americans abroad. That's the first point I would make before we get into this this business with the 6,000 deduction. Second point I would make is that I think it's important to keep some perspective on this whole thing. This particular bill, right? Whether you're looking at the Trump pledge, the LaHood initiative, or anything else, is and was really the beginning, of a lot of stuff going on. So I think it's important to stay focused on the overall goal, and simply say, well, there was no tax relief in, the first legislative opportunity. I emphasize legislative. My impression of this, okay, is that there will be more legislative opportunities. That is reconciliation bills coming. But secondly, don't forget that none of this rules out the possibility of a regulatory fix. So I just think it's important. I mean, I agree that this is painful and that, but I think it's important, okay, to stay focused on the goal as all of this stuff continues to roll out.
Do you think, John, there are any, have you heard of any rumblings about a regulatory fix at this point?
No, I have
Okay.
not. I have
I'm just
not.
wondering. Yeah.
But the point is that I'll tell you why I actually, again, this is my opinion only, and therefore, do with it what you want. Okay. But I am actually, to some extent, relieved that none of this stuff got into the big, beautiful bill, because every part of that, was scrutinized upside down, sideways, diagonally, etc. And I think that it would have put the whole, I think that it would have created the opportunity to frame the issue as somehow Americans abroad trying to get away with something, particularly, with these Democrats, etc. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have been better. That it definitely, I don't know that it would have been an advantage. We can never know. If, for example, the Hood bill or something had been part of the big, beautiful bill, it's hard to say. But I mean, my God, look at the way, the press got a hold of certain parts of it, that Virgin Islands thing and, the 899 thing, and et cetera. I mean, there was a lot of attention paid to this. And I think everybody would agree that help, the cavalry, if you will, for Americans abroad is much more likely to be coming out in the dead of night, rather than the light of day, where there's going to be all kinds of people who, will oppose it without having any idea why they're opposing it, of course. Just because it's so easy to frame this if you're a Democrat as, what? I mean, we're giving some tax giveaway to some undeserving group or something.
Well, and John, I think that's the kind of the brokenness of the whole system. And I think this is, this is sort of where I'm at this. And I think there's actually a lot of good news to happen. None of it's in the bill. But I think the good news is this, is our political system has been exposed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Has been exposed. Look, people voted for Donald Trump for a sea change to clean up the swamp. And the fact is, you can't look at the one big, whatever this thing is, as anything but a swamp creation. And it went through the same swamp nonsense. It went through the same nonsense of, oh, we're going to score this, we're going to score this. And as soon as you get into scoring, you lost. You lost already. And what I was looking to see from Donald Trump, and this is really why, I'm a little bit, I'm not so happy with this, is number one, you made this a very explicit campaign promise. You didn't. This was a very explicit campaign promise. When you make something a campaign promise, that is an implication that you're making it a priority. But here he didn't even mention. There was no discussion. It's like he had amnesia about his own promise. And so that's the problem. That's the problem in that you're like, well, we didn't want this in the bill. It's like, well, you know what? Then you needed leadership. Because the reason why this can be explained to every American. Why, basically ignore the media, but you can explain to every American why this is completely unfair and unconstitutional, and you need to stand up for something. But instead, he just sort of, whatever the process is. But I think that's the lesson, that's the takeaway. There is no remedy to politics. I don't think anyone could go out there.
No, I think you're right on that. I mean, this is a very, very, potentially deep discussion, which probably we should devote a single podcast to, right? But I would point out the following. One, I continue to believe that the route to the promised land is through regulatory fix. Okay. Largely because it makes this less political. That's the first thing. Nothing in the pledge, by the way, indicated necessarily a when or a how, this is to be achieved. So I think the fact that it's on record, I mean, we can assume that there will continue to be pressure on the president to come through with this, but also, okay, it is very, very useful for other groups. For example, I noticed that Brandon Mitchner, who runs this TFFA group, whatever it's called, reached out to the new Assistant Secretary for Tax Policy, Ken Keyes, to, I think, introduce the idea of a regulatory fix. Okay, which is helpful. But part of that was, this was a Trump pledge, right? So, I mean, the pledge itself did not restrict it to legislation. Okay, again. And then, there was a further reach out to Chairman Smith of the Ways and Means Committee, basically emphasizing not so much the LaHood bill, but the Trump pledge, right? So the point is that it's there. Everybody's got it. It's on video, and there's no turning back the clock on that. And what that does do is allows for not only Republicans overseas, but other groups, as they are, to leverage that and keep the the movement going in the right direction. And I also would point out that although I think understandably on the retail level, individual Americans abroad and that, we're looking for something, in the first sort of round of legislation. And I understand the disappointment there, but I would point out that there is, at least my understanding is, there is more legislation coming, okay, and there still are opportunities. So the thing is this, Anthony, there's no mileage, okay, in throwing in the towel. No mileage in it, okay? There is mileage into saying, this is a pledge and, continuing to work towards that pledge. Now, is the system broken? You bet it is. Okay, you bet it is. I mean, that's a different discussion. And I think on the issue of scoring, again, this is my opinion only, but in my opinion, if it's something they want, the scoring doesn't matter. If it's something they're ambivalent on, don't want, then the scoring matters.
There you go. Thank you.
And,
that's well said, John.
Yeah,
Thank
and that's why, this whole, again, these are just my opinions. So none of this is, should be taken as having any correlation with reality. Okay. However, it does seem to me that this LaHood emphasis on we need scoring is, may come back to bite them.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, and if you're just joining us, I think we have a lot of people joining us today, and probably a lot of new people too. So I'm Anthony Parent. I am with Keith Redmond and John Richardson, and we are sort of going over our one big bill postmortem, sort of like what's going on. We're big promises that didn't work out. We're going over it now. What John's mentioning is go ahead, Keith. Yeah,
if I may interject for people that don't understand, when you said that scoring might be the death knell in a bill,
could be.
Can you explain why you think so, or what the historic reference is for that, for people who just don't understand it?
Okay, so we have laws that are enforced, we have laws that are not enforced, and we have laws that exist to be used to further people's specific interests and point of view. Now, there are these pay-go laws, which in simple terms, I think say that, if you're going to make a law that somehow costs money, you have to find a way, to save money somewhere else, right? So people call this revenue neutrality. But of course, it's total bullshit, okay? It's not a requirement at all. I think it's, it's probably aspirational at best. But I mean, my God, let's look at the, this big, beautiful bill. I don't think there's a single person who's taken the position, that it isn't a cost to the Treasury. Okay. Nobody's taking the position this thing is revenue neutral. There may be, economists who, are trying to support the Trump administration. But the point is, it doesn't matter whether it's revenue neutral. What matters is the perception that it's not, okay? And given that the perception is that it's not, even if it really is, that doesn't matter. Given that the perception is that it is not, it is very clear that this whole doctrine of revenue neutrality, we can't have the law unless it's revenue neutral, is an outright lie. Okay, it's an outright lie.
It is an outright. Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, pay-go budgeting is pay as you go. That bills are supposed to be revenue neutral. I've looked into this a lot, and essentially that a bill goes to the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, which they keep every time you say CBO, and government thinks bipartisan CBO, as if that is somehow a virtue in of itself. Well, it's bipartisan. It's both parties, right? But actually, then it goes to CBO, and here's the thing: the CBO projections are never held up to reality. That is, if the CBO says, oh, you know what, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act is going to bring in extra $2-3 billion a year, no one ever goes back to the CBO to say, hey, guys, I noticed something. You guys projected this, but your bill did that. Maybe you guys don't know what you're doing about, and that's really the thing. The CBO, actually, the entire office donates most of their money to Democrats, and they score bills and play games every which way to make things happen. They score FATCA as a way to say, oh, it's going to be a revenue neutral.
Yeah,
of course, it's the opposite. It's the opposite, and they're still promoting this fraud as if it matters.
Well, that's right. And in this particular context, right, I think it's extremely important to, make the point that it doesn't matter a goddamn, whether it's revenue neutral or not. All right. I mean, nobody can even know what the numbers are. I mean, let's say it's not revenue neutral and there's a cost. That should not stop progress in this area. Why? Because this is absolutely immoral. Yeah. It's a moral issue, and it's the wrong thing. These same people would take this, we can't end slavery. No, it's going to cost money. We're not going to end slavery. I mean, I'm not saying that citizenship taxation is slavery, but I'm pointing out that if the test, all right, actually is revenue neutrality and only revenue neutrality, then, so much of the horrible things that have continued, that have existed and continue to exist in some degrees in the United States could never be rectified by law. All right. I mean, that's the bottom line. So, the point is this has to change. Everybody has to maintain an attitude that this is possible. And I believe that it not only that it is, but that it will change. The only thing we're betting on is time. I think some people need to renounce because they're not going to get relief fast enough. Okay. But it will change. All right. As long as people hang together. Who was it? Was it Benjamin Franklin who said, if we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately?
Well, you know what? And I want to, thank you, John, for that. And by the way, because a lot of times you might have caught me on this channel where I just sort of maybe rant without any action steps, but I think we actually have some action steps. And I see one of our good friends is on the show right now. One of the ones responsible. Good morning to you, Andrew. One of the ones kind of responsible for pointing me in the right direction. So I think there's some things we'll talk about at the end that actually give us some hope. There's actually some real meaningful hope. And if you look at some of the interesting things some of the Supreme Court justices are saying, it's very interesting. So I would say, and Andrew's the one who's kind of, thank you very much for joining us. You're giving a lot of hope, and I have an update for you, Andrew. I'll get to at the end of the show. So I think there is some great hope. So we're so let's just say we're angry, we're mad, but we're not hopeless. Okay, but we do want to talk about exactly what happened because there's some meaningful changes in there for people. So let me get up some of the basic notes that we had from the going over the changes.
Why don't we just do the first thing that we had up, then we'll move into the harder stuff.
Okay, all right. So let's get to this one. Okay.
So I just want to go to the bottom line here. This new senior $6,000 deduction, basically whatever that is, 65 or over. This is, I think, incredibly helpful to people in Canada. Okay. Because for U.S. citizens living in Canada, under the treaty, U.S. Social Security, Canada Pension Plan, and Old Age Security are not taxed by the U.S. at all.
And by the way, you also said that this is probably true in other countries as well. You just haven't.
I think this may very well be true in Germany as well. Okay, I did not have time. I mean, I did this. I always do this stuff very quickly. Okay, right. But I mean, the point is that there are other countries like that. And so one way of looking at this that is kind of interesting is that once again, where somebody lives, seems to, impact this rather dramatically. But the point here is this, that, I'm really speaking to those of you who are 65 and over and have simple lives and who are sort of, are trying to make ends meet, in retirement. So, and you're a U.S. citizen, so you're trying to file a U.S. return. The effect of this actually is, we want to scroll down a little bit. Okay, I'm stealing a little bit here from the AARP and H&R Block. Okay, but the bottom line on this is, just keep going down a little bit. I mean, it's really pretty extraordinary. On today's exchange rate, you'd have to have like about 31,000 Canadian dollars of other income before you'd have any U.S. tax liability at all. Now think about that. That's like $2,500 a month in pension income. I mean, obviously there are a lot of people who have plenty more, but there's an awful lot of people out there in the world, who are trying to living off these basic pension things, and that extra $6,000. Now, a tax preparer might say, well, we'd use foreign tax credit, but there's a big expense, to preparing these returns. What this actually does, and this is the message that I kind of like to give to anybody who's listening, is that this may make your tax preparation an awful lot simpler. Okay, you're not going to need a lot of these fancy forms, etc. So, not only now think of what this means for those of you who have TFSAs, income inside TFSAs, etc. All of a sudden that's no longer an issue, et cetera, et cetera. So why don't I just say this, that for that group of people around the world, I would encourage you to rethink what your U.S. tax return should look like, because you might be able to simplify to the point where it's like, 3 or 4 forms, even to the point where you might be able to do it yourself, right? Et cetera. So, that's a real benefit. Now, undoubtedly, there are benefits to resident Americans on this as well. But, I think about this from the perspective of Americans abroad. So that very definitely is a benefit.
So would you say, though, I mean, I guess so. So would a fair argument to be made is that could someone say, well, this bill favors Canadian retirees over Americans? Could someone make that claim?
Maybe. I'm not sure. You'd have to remember that Social Security. So the point is, right, that what under the treaty, U.S. Social Security, Canada Pension Plan, OAS, these are sort of, things these people might have, are exempted from U.S. taxation. Now, again, I'm not a tax preparer, as you know, and B, I don't live in the United States, right? But my impression, okay, of the taxation of Social Security in the United States is that you have to get to a fairly high level, okay, of income before it's taxed at all. So, it's obviously beneficial to people in the United States. Maybe not. I don't know. It's always hard to compare apples and oranges. But I think what's significant here is usually what we're seeing, is legislation that specifically hurts Americans abroad. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm really not seeing it here. I mean, I think this is a benefit. There is the whole GILTI problem that, we'll talk about separately, but that's sort of an equal opportunity. Well, and GILTI affects more Americans abroad, so I think that that's probably a negative. But anyway, I mean, I think that that's an important one. And let me just add a little bit why I think this is important, because, I really think that there's a God out there who hits me with the same type of situation 3 times in a week to make sure I understand why this is going on. But the last couple of weeks, for whatever reason, I found myself having conversations with incredibly low-income people, who are just going to pieces, with anxiety over this stuff, and and trying to help them, think about this stuff, and and so what I've been doing is kind of looking at this and saying, like what are they required to file a tax return at all? I mean, that's one interesting thing. Okay. Because some of these people are below the, the standard deduction. Are they required to file at all? And if so, how could they organize their lives so that they might have 3 or 4 forms, instead of a 50-page tax return sort of thing, right? And this definitely adds, to the ability to, to make this stuff simple. Now there may be some people who don't have to file at all. Depending, we still have some very, very sore points though, right? And this isn't changed by the legislation, but remains a very sore point from 2017, is the married filing separately group, right? Which would be a lot of Americans abroad who are married to non-U.S. spouses, have to file if they have $5 of income, right? So believe it or not, okay?
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's incredible. Okay, this was a sort of a mistake from the 2017 thing, right? But this is why, if you have to file, it's extremely important to figure out how to file in the most minimalistic way.
Yeah.
And this definitely opens the door for many people, not all, right, but for many people, to a much more simplified filing process that I honestly think they could do themselves. Okay.
I don't know, John. I'm not sure there, because here we are talking about the simplified, how much more simpler this is on a podcast. And that when you add laws, that can't make it simpler. When you add carve-outs, that never makes it simpler. That when you have these special rules, it's all another level of inquiry you need to go into. So I'm not sure if it actually.
I don't know.
Right. I mean, and I
we'll
think one thing that it just cracks me up is when I see this, like your tax rate, your taxes that you pay depend on how old you are.
Well, the whole thing is just, it's a bunch of nastiness, and they create carbon.
Imagine if we had an equal protection under the law. Imagine that. Imagine if there was an equal protection. That would really be something. But boy, would the tax code have a problem with that?
Woo. Anthony, I think it's gotten so bad, particularly with the information returns. I guess it was the late 1800s, Brandeis wrote this classic article about privacy. You got to find it. Just look up Brandeis privacy. Anyway, what he basically says is that, privacy is the most fundamental human right, and that it's necessary for freedom. And I think I honestly think this has gotten to the point. When I think about that, I think about Charles Adams. I think that the future of human freedom depends on getting rid of the income tax.
There we go.
There
we go. Yes, let's talk. Yeah, that's exactly
I'll give it
right.
to you again. Ready?
Yeah, let's see.
Okay. I don't know if I can repeat exactly. Okay. Basically, when we look at the Brandeis article, and then we look at some of the Charles Adams stuff, and we just play a few of the IRSMedic podcasts, I think it's a fair conclusion that the continuation of human freedom is absolutely dependent on abolishing the income tax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that is the only way to go. And I mean, I think we see the exact, we see the result of it. And I think this is really where I would probably want to just sort of say, like, what is going on exactly with our government? What exactly happened? How did we end up in this situation where allegedly, look, the British, again, where the Patriots were railing against King George, who had passed no laws. It was only Parliament who did. And they were railing against Parliament for passing laws that effectively tax about 1.5% of the colonist's income. So you have people upset over 1.5% of tax, and now they jump into the barrel so they could be taxed at these horrible rates. So what happened along the lines? Well, I think one thing is the founding of the country isn't exactly what happened. And really what has happened is this. This is the number one thing that has happened over the years, is that we have allowed statutes, constitutions and statutes, to override the common law, the fundamental law protections. This is what people don't understand. This is the biggest mythology that people have about the founding of this country, that the Bill of Rights does not create any new rights. There's no new rights. There's not one right that the Bill of Rights creates, not one. All it does is specifically name that here's certain rights that the government can't infringe. By the way, this is not the Declaration of All Rights. All rights, we find, are in the common law that developed from the Magna Carta against the king, by the way. So if the fundamental law can push up against a king, then why is it no good against a republic, a republic constitution? That is really where we've gone so much off the rails, and we could start seeing it. There we go. What do we got there? Oh, there, John's got it. There it is. That is what we're talking.
Yeah, from the British Library or poster.
That's beautiful. I need to get one of those myself up there.
You
Put
should.
it in the background. Absolutely.
And
that's really the fun. And I think the number one thing, and this is what I say. It's so easy. This is why I'm optimistic. It is so easy. John, Keith, you know this. You guys know this. You know how ridiculous these returns are, right, Keith? You know how. I mean, the amount of bandwidth, Keith, that you're talking with people over these things. I mean, come on, it's ridiculous, right?
Well, it is. And I mean, if you recall my friend, Kathleen Dameron, remember the African-American lady in Paris?
Yeah.
I mean, her returns have been a few hundred pages.
Yes. And
no exaggeration. I've seen them with my own eyes.
And she is a great example. Thank you for bringing that up. So Catherine is in France. We had her on the show. She's talking about her
twice.
Twice. And here's the thing, and this is the thing that always that I don't think I told her this. Oh no, I think I probably did ask her, like, why even bother doing this? Just say no, I'm not going to file. Come get me. And I think, and this is the question I have for a lot of clients come to me. They say, I want to come in compliance. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to tell you not to. Right. But so many times I'm like, really? Why do you guys pay someone to do this? Just not do it. And the answer is this, and I find it again and again. Americans cannot help but follow the law. They can't even when the law is
she was talked into filing, and she really shouldn't have, because she left the United States when she was 16. You know what I mean? It has never lived in the United States.
But it doesn't take a lot to talk an American into following.
Oh, I know.
Well, that's the point, right? I mean, Americans are
they're rule followers regardless of how impossible the rules are.
And even if it's financially ruinous to them.
Right. They are. So that is actually our good
The less they understand it, the more they'll follow it too.
And so that's what I want to put down is our inventory of things, okay? Because that's actually a good fact. That Americans will follow the law no matter how stupid it is or good it is. They will. Okay. Number two, what is the highest law of the land? That's the question. If people knew the highest law of the land isn't actually the U.S. Constitution, that the U.S. Constitution itself is bound by the common law, that the common law is actually the highest law on the land, that's all we need to do. Number one, Americans follow laws no matter what. Number two, the highest law of the land would forbid much of this government nonsense. And the common law is what constrains the government. That's the only way to do it. That the entire purpose of the government is to create a political cartel where you're buying and selling favors. That's its entire point. That statutes represent nothing but political process. Why would you ever want to be ruled by the political process? This is just buying, this is just favoritism. The one big beautiful bill, this is exactly what Washington, D.C. is. Nothing no one voted for. Nothing no one voted for. It is so divorced and it's so out of control. And again, we have laws. And again, we have 2.3 million words in the U.S. tax code. Okay. One big beautiful bill changes about 50,000, 100,000. So whatever this is actually doesn't even change that much of the code, because the code goes on and on and on forever. And so the thing is, the reason why we have a government that is out of control is for one reason, because Americans don't know what the highest law of the land is. They've been conditioned to believe that the Supreme Court, the government, tells us which rights we have. Oh, you get this right. You get this right. Oh, and by the way, we could take away your passport if you don't take away this. If you don't pay this tax bill. I mean, the ultimate coercion. There's another like wildly wild where the government will take away your passport. And by the way, in the state of New York, they'll take away your driver license for an unpaid bill. Unbelievable. It's incredible.
They'll take away your passport if it's a bill, if it's a tax owed over $50,000.
That's right. And you're not, and for some people, they can't get into the installment agreement. It's really something that the IRS has weird rules.
Really?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
I didn't realize
this is the problem, that when you have someone overseas, is that the IRS will say, well, we're going to give you the allowable living expenses. Like, yeah, but I'm living in Dubai. A bottle of water is $10.
Right.
Yeah, well, we think you have an ability to pay. So they'll create fictitious numbers to pay. So sometimes it's very difficult for people overseas who have more than $50,000 to get into an affordable payment agreement, because the government isn't accounting for their actual reasonable living expenses. Because, and this is the problems of imposing, a tax jurisdiction beyond your borders. You end up with absurdities, just absolute absurdities. And yet we have, so here's Andrew. Andrew, thank you so much for what you're saying. We have a right to common law. The common law is fundamental law. That's lowercase constitutional law. And that was really one of the arguments of the anti-federalists is like, we don't want to, the argument of the federalists was, guys, we don't want a Bill of Rights. Why is that? Because we put down the rights, people are going to say those are the only rights that exist. The curse of negative implication, it's actually a bad thing because we don't need these articulated. We already have our constitutional rights. They are already in the common law.
Well, it is interesting that if you look at countries that don't have a written constitution, for example, the UK does not have a written constitution. I don't think that anybody would seriously argue that Americans have more rights than Brits.
That more? I don't think so.
No, I don't think anybody would argue they have more.
Right? Yeah, right.
All I'm saying, is that a written constitution is not a necessary condition, for a generally free society. And I do think that the generally, leaving aside the common law aspect to this, I think that generally the U.S. Constitution is used just as much to restrict rights as possibly to enhance them. Because one of the interesting things is on an international human rights level, even when the U.S. signs on to these things, they will interpret the right as no greater than the U.S. Constitution would allow. Yeah. So, this is a very interesting problem.
Yeah, that's wrong.
But I think it is. I know that this is just, shocking for an American to hear. But, there are plenty of Americans have more rights than people in many, many countries. But it is wrong, I think, at this point to suggest that the U.S. is some kind of a world leader in freedom and human rights.
No, right. And I think everything, all these the Constitution is used against us. That's how it's always.
That's right. Because if you look at, for example, we look at the FATCA issue and the Republicans overseas FATCA legal action lawsuit back in whenever that was, 2014. And one of the arguments, I've forgotten most of this, but one of the arguments that they made was that this was sort of an unlawful invasive search. Contrary to the Fourth Amendment or something. But anyway, the way the case came down was the Fourth Amendment limits the right to limits the right to unreasonable search and seizure. This sort of thing, right to, this, that, or the other type of thing. And this is a problem. And the other problem with enumerating rights. This is an interesting thing. You look at Canada, it's got a relatively new constitution, 1982, so they wrote down all these rights, et cetera. But I do think that, one of the problems of that is the whole argument that, therefore, these are the rights, the only rights. And where this is coming up, we talk about the Roger Ver case and the whole issue of whether people have a right to expatriate. Right? The government has already taken the position that there's no constitutional right to expatriate. I think largely based on these kinds of arguments. Where is it in the Constitution? That sort of thing, right?
And that's exactly the problem we have when we follow the Constitution is that it doesn't say these things. And that's what happens when we look at it the wrong way. We have to look at the Constitution as only given express limited powers to the federal government that is controlled by common law. That is actually how this is supposed to work and can kind of work to some degree. But the political process is always going to be incredibly ugly. And all we need to do for evidence of that is to look at the very first law signed into very first bill signed into law by President George Washington, the excise tax of 1791. It was not a good tax. It was a very bad tax, and it was designed to specifically punish rural interests where whiskey was basically a commodity. It took the cost of whiskey from about $6. I mean, they made a lot of whiskey in today's dollars to about $9. But really what it was doing was going in the pockets of everyone doing that. And this is the thing, the Fourth Amendment was immediately violated because what George Washington did is he had to put a bunch of revenuers in the rural parts of Pennsylvania, the country, to go and park in people's houses, to go do these unreasonable searches and seizures. And why? Because government want its taxes. There was a whiskey rebellion. What did Washington do? He stormed the rural parts of the country, like Pennsylvania, with 10,000 federal troops from the East Coast and enforced his law. So very quickly, we know the political process in this country is garbage. It's garbage. Very first one is harming people, resulting in an upheaval. And this is really a problem. The political interests back east wanted people in other parts of the country to pay the bills, right? And there you see, that's what politics is. Politics is getting your enemies to pay for your stuff. That's what it is. And that's what we see. And that's really what America has been. It's about giving favors to political donors. Now the favors, the political donors seem to be people outside of the United States. That's why we have so many things that are anti-American, including the tax code. We have so many things. And this is the mental exercise.
Well, Anthony, do you think that, this first whiskey tax, do you think people understood what it was?
At the time?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. You think anybody knows what's in the big, beautiful bill?
No.
This is another problem, right? And I think it's an even bigger problem is the way that, these laws are made. I don't think that, I think omnibus bills ought to be unconstitutional, illegal. I think this is crazy. I think that I think that there ought to be minimum lengths of times before these things can be voted on, depending on the length of the bill. You have 1,000 pages. We're going to have 10 weeks, 20 weeks. None of this. We're going to vote on this in 2 days because you can be certain that basically nobody in Congress had even the biggest idea of what they were voting on.
Absolutely. No, they don't. And actually, you know what? I was actually thinking that, this bill is so terrible and its name is so obnoxious that I wonder if this is all a troll. I wonder if this is all a troll to expose just how terrible it is and seeing how incredulous people, how far are people willing to go along with this? Because if you are someone who voted for Donald Trump, you have been, this was not what you wanted. This is not at all what you wanted. Keith, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking with what John was saying. I was just giving a thought here. I think people in Congress know what's in the bill that affects them and maybe maybe not their constituents, but they hone in on what they have in the bill for themselves. So, for example, they've repealed the threshold for the 1099K. Okay, that's for people who have side hustles. So I think Congress made people hone in on that, and they don't care about the rest of the bill. So they'll just vote, let's pass the bill. You see what I mean? So they just hone on different sections and not knowing the rest of it, that could be quite detrimental to everyone else.
That may very well be, or maybe there are even some people who, have a broader understanding of what is in this stuff. But the point here is this.
Well, it's impossible to read a bill that's 900 pages.
But at the same, and if I could just say, but Keith, and just something on that 1099, right? This is what's crazy.
1099K.
The 1099K is that the threshold. It was 25,000. Then it was lowered to $600.
That was because of the. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Right, but what did the IRS do? The IRS says, we're not going to do that. We're going to go to the old rule because we can't. That $600 threshold is not workable for us. So the IRS itself just decided not to follow the law.
Well, exactly.
They were trying to do this, like it's not practical. Isn't that something that the government could say, hey, look, if something's not practical for us, we can ignore the law.
Exactly.
Well, the question there is, what do the laws say? I mean, a lot of these things, give Treasury the right to declare carve-outs, et cetera. But sorry, can you tell me what this is exactly? I'm not clear on what you're talking about. Just quick.
Well, the 1099-K is for people that have side hustles, and so they get paid through PayPal or
PayPal,
Venmo
yeah.
or whatever.
So this
And
is like
prior,
an eBay seller or something? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, and prior to the Biden bill that was put into law, what's that one, that the big bill during Biden's administration?
Anti-Inflation Act or something?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Prior to that, the threshold was 200 transactions or $20,000. Above that, you get issued a 1099-K. Then
Okay.
it was put down to $600 with that bill. And the IRS said, well, no, this is too complicated. We're going to have to do this piecemeal.
I
just,
remember they were doing it over a multi-year
over a period of time. Well,
Okay.
this big, beautiful bill put the kibosh on all that. So now it's back to 200 transactions
All right, well, that
or
seems reasonable.
20,000.
That also seems like a good thing. So the effect of this is that PayPal doesn't rat you out. Is that the point?
Right.
Well,
Exactly.
but this is sort of funny because what's going on, and this is what I hear every January, February from my clients is like, man, I'm not getting my 1099s from my man. People aren't sending me my 1099s every year. There's fewer and fewer 1099s that our clients get, and because here's the thing: if you don't file a 1099, guess what the penalty is?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of 1099. If you actually look at the penalties, they're not big, and they don't even assess them. So that's one of the things. Like people are like, there's not even penalties. So you put these laws out there, and the government never even looks to see, well, what are we doing on enforcement? And that's really that's how divorced the government is from itself, right?
Yeah.
And it's allowed to be. The government's allowed to not know what anything is doing because it's just run so amok. And I've got to just go back to Andrew. We're just going back to this because the source of rights, and this was just something. This is actually what shocked me in law school, and this was actually a pretty good day when in constitutional law the question is like, where do rights come from? Where do rights come from? And look, this is what I'm at the age where I really wasn't a big believer in God or any of that stuff. I'm like, no, I'm better and bigger than that. But you're kind of stuck with a problem. Like, well, if natural rights don't come from God, then where do they come from? And then the answer would be, well, the government. So that's sort of the issue. Like, if you're like, that's why you could see why there's a lot of people who have an interest in destroying God, because by destroying God, you destroy the rule of law. We're left with these statutes that can mean anything and all things, contradictory things that the government has to do, doesn't have to do. The law is sort of independent of government actions. The government isn't controlled by the law; it's controlled by the government. That's really if that. So I think that is where our biggest problem is that we're conditioned to think that there's some other place that rights can come from. And this is a philosophical debate, which always cracks me up when people claim, oh, there was a separation of church and state. It's like, well, the official state religion of Connecticut at the signing of the Constitution was Congregationalism. So that was a weird thing for them to do. Maryland was Catholicism. They were the one.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that people are conditioned not to actually understand what the formation of our country, and that really the formation of our country is a natural extension of the New Testament. It's a natural extension. That's what it actually is. And the law creates the government, and the government doesn't create the law. There you go, Andrew. So this is where we're heading. Is boys are bringing me back to some of my old days in law school. And I did really I took a great class on the history of the Bill of Rights, which kind of opened my mind to a lot of things that we weren't taught in constitutional law. It was an elective. The history of the Bill of Rights was an elective. I really wish it wasn't. I wish it was a mandatory class in law school. It really should be, along with more of the common law. By the way, your first year of common law, law school is mostly common law, contracts, torts, criminal law. And that's what makes it a lot of fun. Then you go to the next year, the second year. Oh, we had federal taxation. Oh, that was our law. Then you get into administrative law. So your second year law starts to suck because the common law is no longer really what is taught. It's now all the statutory nonsense, all the regulations, where the money is. A lot of, and there's a lot of, people in the healthcare administration. There's a lot of money to be made there. That's really more where they're teaching there. Unfortunately, they're not really. I don't think they're really. I kind of feel like, we really need a new type of law school, if you don't mind. And John, I want to make you a professor there, by the way. All right, I want to get in a couple more things that are in here. There's some more changes that we had. I want to get more into what. Let me put this up here. Move this. Add this. Get this back up. Okay, get back up there. I can add that. There it is. So here we go. This is what I want. There we go. Now it's okay. So let's go. Let me get to the point we want to make. This is what John talked about seniors, but now I want to talk about GILTI. And there were some changes to GILTI. We see we lost some deductions, and the GILTI income base has been expanded. So John, you had some snippets about this. Let's go ahead. This is on your article. I can get your articles up. Just tell me.
No, the articles are too long.
Okay.
Okay. So everybody, just for the benefit of listeners who don't know what GILTI is, so if you have a foreign corporation, controlled foreign corporation, the corporation is a separate legal entity, and therefore a separate taxpayer somewhere, right? Wherever it's formed, another country. But the point is that historically, the shareholders of the corporation would not be subject to tax on the earnings and the distribution was paid out to the shareholder, in the form of a dividend, or maybe they were acting as an employee or something. So this whole subpart F regime, of which GILTI is part of it, is really a way for the IRS to look at a foreign corporation they don't have the right to tax directly and say, oh my God, look, there's a foreign corporation. It has profits, but we can't tax it because it's a foreign corporation. So by God, if they're U.S. citizen shareholders, we're going to make them pay the tax directly on the income earned by the corporation, which wasn't distributed, right? So that's what this is about.
And if I could just hold up there, John, because I think I just want to interject there, because there is a wow, and that comes from subpart F. Now, something that you just need to keep in mind: this is the government charging you an income tax on income you never received.
Exactly.
It's deeming you received income, but you didn't. It's a fake tax. It's phantom tax. This has been around since 1960. Now, this is the thing, is no one challenged this fake tax. And so that is what led, and I think that's what led to Supreme Court upholding the transition tax, because I think if you think about it, hey, look, subpart F is taxing people on income they never received. And that's just the same thing as the transition tax. The big difference in the transition tax is it was retroactive over several years, where subpart F is just a yearly punitive thing.
I've never heard 31 years called several years, Anthony, but okay. It was a retroactive tax for 31 years.
Fair enough. You're right, John. Yeah.
That was I think I wrote 55 blog posts on separate aspects of that case. But, the argument was, of course, that there was no realization event. The shareholders never received the income, therefore they couldn't be taxed on it. And they kind of limited the argument to that. I really think the better argument was the retroactivity. Because it's one thing to tax the stuff currently. It's another to go back 31 years. But anyway, so GILTI came out of the 2017 stuff, and it's really a look-through provision that says, you know what, you can run this foreign corporation if you want, but we're going to attribute the earnings of the corporation. You're going to have to pay tax on that, even though you never received the income. Now, when this came out in 2017, it wasn't all of the income that was subject to tax. They gave basically a discount, which equated to a 10% return on capital invested in the business, so to speak, right? So the first thing they did in the big, beautiful bill was they got rid of that. Okay, that sort of exclusion of certain income from being taxed because it was a return on capital. And I think they realized at that point that once they've gotten rid of that, why not just change the name of it altogether? They got rid of the GILTI Global Intangible Low Taxed Income, which is a ridiculous name. And now they just call it net CFC tested income, right? Which is, I think, more honest. But, what I think was really funny was back in 2017, to show you how little people understand, there was this idea that the U.S. was somehow moving to territorial taxation for its corporations. But by enacting GILTI, and I said this right back at that time, continue to say it, is that when the U.S. moved to territorial taxation for its corporations, what they really did by enacting GILTI was simply expanding the territory over which they were taxing income, right? I mean, yeah, territorial, we're expanding the territory. Anyway, the whole thing is ridiculous.
Well, I just want to, explain something too. It's like let me go, I want to add this to the stage here. Let me just get this back here. Okay, so here's gross income defined. This is where we go to the code to define gross income. And gross income is defined. Gross income means all income from whatever source derived. And then you get to section 2. Gross income means derived from business is gross income. So essentially what gross income is gross income is income derived from business. So you have a definition that defines itself. Therefore, you actually don't have something. We actually don't know exactly what gross income is. The Supreme Court attempted to clarify, but never quite does. We have various tests, but it's really whatever they feel like doing is what income. If income is what we know it, income is what you have. Income is what our enemies have. Our friends don't have income. I think that's really probably the best way.
You just look at the general definition. Except as other provided, gross income means all income from whatever source. Income it's not itself, but it says, but definitely includes the following. So all this is that, anything we say is income for sure, but make no mistake about it. Don't argue with us about these specific things. They're income. Okay.
Their income, right? Yeah.
I mean, that's all it really is, because that's the only way you can get to, the whole. I mean, you look at the international information return regime, whether it's 5471s, 3520s, et cetera. What they're really trying to do is find ways to attribute income to people from foreign sources that was never actually received. I mean, that's the theme that runs through all of these returns. Anyway, so that's the first thing. The second thing they did was, now obviously, well, at least I would think it'd be obvious, if they've already taxed income in the form of GILTI, then when somebody, so no, we're not quite there yet. Then they had section 250, okay?
I'll go back. Okay, let me get back to so get back to this. So there's section 250 in here, and this is always one of the things where corporations, believe it or not, were treated better in the Tax Cuts and Job Act than individuals. Yeah, I know.
Totally, they were treated better.
I mentioned that. I know.
Well, yeah, okay, but what happened? Well, anyway, so what 250 says simply, all right, you know what? Although we're going to make you include the GILTI in your income, you only have to include half of the amount, right? Okay, that's what they did. And then there was actually a provision written in that, after 2025 or whatever, that they gave a 50% deduction. Then it was going to go to a 37.5% deduction. Interestingly, in the big, beautiful bill, it went to a 40% deduction, which actually was a little better, okay, than what it was going to be. It's interesting, okay, because they increased the deduct. Although, how can I put it? Although more income is included because of GILTI, less is included that would have been had we not amended the 2017 law, which was going to reduce the deduction to 37% from 50, but now it's 40.
Oh my God.
So, I mean, to some extent, it's a little bit better there. And this is, of course, any tweaking with GILTI and this sort of stuff is, I would think, in general, a problem for Americans abroad. However, there's nothing really that would change the effect of the regulations on this. So my reading, fortunately, didn't change the corporate tax rate. I mean, my reading of this is that, if your active business income and if your investment income is taxed at, in the country you're in, higher than 18.9%, you're excluded from all of that. I don't think that has changed.
All right. And we got a few more things. By the way, be sure to ask your questions. We're going to be we want to get to our questions. So if you have any, let us know. I do know we have a lot of people on today, so that's fantastic. And if you're new, also say hi. I'd like to hear from you. So we have some slight relief for foreign tax credits.
I don't know what's going on there. I saw.
Yeah, there's and then and then I think one of the things too, as I saw in this bill, just sort of to point out the fact that there's many rules if you have a foreign look. Of course, the U.S. government wants to tax everything because hey, why not? The problem is but what happens is that while they will tax you everywhere, it won't give you the same favorable tax treatments of domestic companies. One is in research and development. That in the U.S. you could write off your research and development expense that year. If you're overseas, you have to amortize that. So your present value of money is worth not nearly it was what is your immediate write-off. Then someone's like, well, that's why you want to have a company in the United States of America. Well, not everything can be in America, like say a resort or something like that. There's a lot of businesses that actually can't be in America, right, Keith? There's a few that can't be. Sorry. Not everything can be in the United States. So there it is. The law intentionally
Could
punishing.
it just pretend it's in the United States?
Yeah, right. I guess so. Right. Just pretend.
Why
Right?
not open our business and say we deem this to be in the United States?
There we are. Right. There it is. Yeah. I think that's the way to go. We deem it. So that there you get right. And I think you could probably do that.
I have an idea on this. I've been thinking about this whole double taxation problem. And I wonder if people aren't going about this all wrong. I mean, they seem to think that the reason for double taxation is because of U.S. citizenship taxation. Isn't the problem really that other countries tax American citizens?
The problem, there's an easy way for double taxation, Dan.
You're right. How dare they, John?
I know.
I know. No, but I was thinking through the logic of this, and it makes sense to me. I mean, everybody agrees that, to use citizenship as a indicator of tax residency is completely ridiculous. It's arbitrary. And we see citizenship taxation, but that opens the door to citizenship non-taxation. For example, the dual citizenship exemption of the exit tax, right? Why not? And I got this idea when I was looking at the 899 stuff, right? The U.S. beginning to use taxation as a way to attack other countries publicly and directly, this 899 stuff. Why not solve the problem by simply making it, the U.S. should just deem that no other country can impose a tax on an American citizen.
There you go.
So Keith flies back to France, he goes through customs, he holds up his U.S. passport, as evidence that he can't be taxed. But wouldn't that end the problem of double taxation?
I think that's the only way. That's the only way this government would do it. I think that's what we would say.
Well, what do you think of the idea, though?
That seems the only practical solution.
I mean,
it really does. I mean, America's not going to give up its ownership right in any American.
True. The only problem with that, if we play it out, is well, then what do you do as far as the benefits you get in your resident country, like healthcare and all that?
That's your
no. Other countries should donate those.
Yeah, right.
Donate. Okay, got it. That would be good. I would be happy with that.
For the privilege of having Americans in your country, it's a small price to pay.
Well, there you go. I think that's exactly right, and the benefits of having America in the world. But when you think about this seriously, right, I mean, the whole idea of using citizenship as a sufficient condition for it is so arbitrary, and it's already being used for non-taxation as well. And we see the clear weaponization of the Internal Revenue Code in this proposed 899. Why not simply shift, to just an executive order, no other country, only America, a declaration like this. U.S. citizens are the property of the United States. They are not to be
exclusive property.
They are not to be interfered with by other countries.
Not be molested by any other countries.
That imposes a tax on our property will pay a penalty. Increased tariffs or, something like. I mean, I see that as a much easier way to solve this. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. We're coming.
It sounds good, and if a country doesn't like it, they can buy the property.
There you go, right on.
Well, but I thought of that. I mean, we could have the great dual citizenship buyout. Seriously, I mean, why not? We have all these American citizens in France. Well, of course, there are, tax treaty benefits to being an American. Let's say Canada, where there are bigger problems. The government of Canada could simply say, look, you know what? We want to buy your citizens from you. We recognize that U.S. citizens are U.S. We just simply like to buy them. Okay, and we'll pay you, X amount, and that would, I mean, look at it this way: the United States gets rid of, troublesome people. They get some money for it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's not to like about it?
I think it's a great proposal that
I
we
mean,
have.
there's so many easier ways to solve this problem.
That's right. And all right. So I think you're right. Now I want to we got to wrap it up here. We're over time. So if you do have questions about what's next, but I think, I'm not expecting, I'm not sure if we're really going to get anything. This might have been the one shot. Who knows? But what I would say is this: is let's not believe that the political process is our only solution or is an actual solution. Really, I mean, come on, take a look at what happened here. This is terrible. I think we really got to start thinking like, you know what, the solution is going to have to come out, because the entire purpose of the government is to be illegal. That's why you're there. That's why you're doing it. And here's something, Andrew, and this is something, and Andrew, I'm going to tell you what I'm up to in a second. Andrew's pointed this out, and let me just walk you through with what he means by this. Income tax is an excise tax, okay? But if you look at what an excise tax is, it's really a privilege tax. The privilege of doing something is what an excise tax is for. People have a right to property and liberty. It's not a privilege. So when you're taxed on your property and liberty, guess what? That you are making a claim that the people don't have an absolute right to the property, which is against the common law. Oh boy. So this is the things where we're going to find, our better arguments here. And so related to this, and exactly, governments are supposed to protect your rights from attack, not be the primary attacker. I mean, is anyone going to say that is anyone going to say out there that the number one problem isn't our own government and our governments? Which bring me to my update for everyone. And I think we all know that, the states, our states are sort of problems, right? Many of our states are problems, and, a lot of the states can give people problems in collections. Various states are kind of aggressive, Maryland, California, and they have bizarre collection practices, which kind of make me ask questions. Well, finally, in the state of Connecticut, Department of Revenue Services has had, my 20 years of doing is a horrible collection process, basically made out of thin air. There's no judicial review. It's a friggin' hen house there. You have a hen house of people who are vindictive, out to lunch, whatever they're up to, and then also have personal attacks against something. I know a lot about the agency. Well, I finally have a client who is going to sue the department. We are going to sue the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services for filing a lien against them, because in the Connecticut, and this is actually true of the IRS as well, they file liens against your property without a court order. Without a court order. You have something of legal effect that was just done by employees with no meaningful oversight. So I am going to be suing the Department of Revenue Services for an injunction to stop them from their illegal collection and assessment. And essentially, this is what all these collections agencies do, is they send things out by certified mail, if that. Maybe it's just regular mail. Well, when you have a dispute against someone, you just can't send certified mail. You have to serve them process, so they show up in court with an independent tribunal. So in the case of taking someone's house, that's actually something where a judge needs to be involved, not just a bunch of stuff that agency set out. So that's going to be the nature of my claim. And so a lot of my arguments are going to be on the common law. Connecticut did adopt the English common law as its heritage. So that is something that we're going to be doing. But that's what I'm hoping to inspire more of, is more of these challenges against the government and more awakening of what the law really is. And to me, it's now kind of very obvious what happened here. Very obvious. The political process was used to subvert the law and turn it against us. It's all been turned against us. Every single law is just turned against us. It's far too expansive. And really the reason why is because the courts have lost their supervisory function. We, the people, have the power to make sure that courts resume their function in regulating this totally illegal and immoral government that cannot be solved. It cannot save itself. Voting will never stop it. I think that proved that. That's my final words on that. Now I want to go over to Keith. Keith, what are your questions? Where do we go from here, I guess? Keith, where do you think we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Well, I admire John's optimism, so I'm going to just go and see, be optimistic, maybe be a cockeyed optimist to see how things go the rest of these months this year to see if something happens vis-a-vis double taxation.
All
Let's
right.
see what happens.
Let's see what
So we
happens.
can't, right? I mean, and as John was saying, okay, there's a legislative process, but there's also a regulatory process. So let's see what happens.
And we do have that. We do have that. And I'm just looking as a negative news because this is his first shot to go for. So maybe there is something else, but let's keep it going and let's keep informed on this. By the way, if you haven't joined Keith's Facebook group, here it is right here: Americans Expatriates for Residency-Based Taxation. Almost at 12,000, Keith. You keep on. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
A great group of people were there for sure. A lot of people who are married to non-U.S. spouses. That's a very common thing here. That's kind of the support, the unofficial support group. So thank you so much for that, Keith. And thanks for joining us today with your unique insight. And thank you for your advocacy work as the formidable Keith.
Yeah, and if people want to talk about, exploring their options and putting together a short-term and long-term strategy, they can reach out to me.
Yep, and here's your email right here. Email Keith right here. US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. Also follow Keith on Twitter at Keith_Redmond.com. You can find him at Twitter as well. So certainly check him out there if you have that. And here's a link to the Facebook group. And I do want to thank again, John, your final words on all of this, if any, or what do you got here? What do you got?
Nothing.
Nothing.
That's all I can think of today.
Well, I would say this: all roads lead where, John?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that all roads lead to renunciation.
And if that's something you're considering doing, there's no one.
Well, look, realistically, I do expect change. Okay, but for a certain segment of people, I don't think it can come soon enough at this point. And so much of this citizenship stuff is sort of habitual thing. I think there's just a lot of people who it's time for them to say goodbye out of necessity.
Oh, you know what? I do want to tease something before we go, John, because you and I will be joining. We'll be interviewing an incredible guest tomorrow. So I do want to give people a heads up to this. Taylor Hudak has done an incredible report on Roger Ver's prosecution. Where'd it go? Let me get up here. So we're going to be interviewing Taylor. John and I both helped her with some of the background on this, but this is a report. We're going to be going over that tomorrow with her, July 17th at 8:30 Eastern. So you might want to hop on for that. A lot of overlapping issues, folks. A lot of overlapping issues when you look at how the government is persecuting Roger Ver and some of their claims. Incredible, and it's really the law for this is the quote. The lawfare isn't really about taxes; it's about control. Yes,
right.
Ver has a long challenge, both permanent in Washington with centralized finance, and he also said some things the government didn't like, which we'll get into tomorrow. There's some very obvious reasons why he was selected for prosecution. Very unfortunate. So we are looking. We're looking for that.
I think the government's likely to lose this. The only way, in my view, they can win if they can prove that he didn't disclose all of that. The valuation thing, they're not going to win on.
I don't think they can win on that. In every which way, and all that. I think we're going to talk about this more. But as we have seen in the record, he did not hide one thing from his professional. Not one thing. He didn't hide one thing. Everything. He was very open and honest with it. Okay, this and that. So they got a problem where you're going to try to criminal conspiracy where there's no crime. That's kind of what they're trying to prove. So that's going to be coming tomorrow. Subscribe. They'll be on Twitter. And with that, by the way, I will have to give a plug to my own business. If you are looking to disclose or you have some complicated tax issue, going through maybe even going through, you need some estate planning, some tax problems coming up there, you can reach out to my firm, IRSMedic.com. Just go to IRSMedic.com. You can schedule a time to book with me. Also, my email. If you have an issue, maybe you want to be a guest, maybe you're a professional yourself, you got some insight for me. I love getting great emails. My email right here is aparent@irsmedic.com. You can reach out to me there, and that goes right to me. So with that, I want to thank Keith Redmond, John Richardson, and hopefully we'll see a bunch tomorrow for joining us today. Thanks, everyone, for joining.